And thanks everyone who joined on time. We're waiting one more minute, I think, and then we're going to get started. Okay, I think we're gonna get started now. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I'm Peter Dolch, the chair of the MIT Sloan Club of New York. And today we are very happy to present the engine to our audience to learn more about what they do and how things work. Just by way of background, I happened to meet Frances Robinson, who's at the engine when she was involved in MIT Solve. And as I think many of you who know me know, I went to MIT quite a long time ago when there weren't things like MIT Delta V, Startup Networks, DesignX, Colab, Solve, the Engine, Startup Exchange, IHQ, Summer Studio, Martin Trust Center, and all those things. And it seems like every few years I learn about a new amazing MIT initiative with some interesting acronym that I've never heard of before. And I do a lot of work in the entrepreneurship ecosystem here in New York and New England. I'd heard of the engine, but I think when I heard of it, it was some accelerator affiliated with MIT, and I didn't know much about it. And I had the good fortune to reconnect with Frances recently, and just simply asked what's up with the engine, and was told an amazing, amazing story. And my first thought was more people who are no longer in the Cambridge directly tied to the ecosystem should learn about what the engine is doing. Either there's ways to collaborate or it's just things we should know as part of the MIT alumni community. So I'm not going to spend any more time introducing Emily or the engine. I'm going to turn it over to her. Quick point. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I will be monitoring the Q&A, and when Emily is done with the presentation, I will read off the questions and answers. And so please use the Q&A option, not the chat option. And with that, I will turn it over to Emily. Emily, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for having me. So my name is Emily Knight. I am the president and CEO of The Engine. I'll give you a little bit of history. I've been here for about almost 8 years. This was an initiative of President Rafael Reif, and the idea that he had seen a lot of really incredible technology being developed in the labs, but that it couldn't find a market. And so he wrote an op-ed, I think back in 2016, and some of the things that we've pulled out of that op-ed that you'll see in my slides, but that sort of underlying our mission, were that there were several gaps from idea, so lab, to investment, some sort of fuel to keep this going as they have escape velocity out of the lab, to impact, because ultimately all of that technology wanted to find its impact. And so a couple of the other things he talked about were patient resources. So think capital infrastructure network and an innovation orchard. And so you really allowed incredible technology to find multiple applications, market applications, so that it was not just being licensed out by, say, a corporate who could line the inside of a ketchup bottle with the technology, but that you could say, how could this technology help battery technology, electric vehicles, all of the above. And so really giving that patient resource, all of the different things that could mean to these technologies. So President Reif and others launched the engine. At the beginning, we had a working system of capital network and infrastructure. And as we've scaled, we have separated the capital from the infrastructure and the accelerator pieces simply because things are moving really fast. I would call it progress and success. And so the two sides, the venture side and the accelerator incubator side, have really specialized. And so I run the engine accelerator and incubator space. I'm going to tell you a lot about the things that we do. Over the almost 8 years I've been here, it has been a very iterative, very sort of improvisational way that we have followed these companies and their pathways to fill the gaps. And that really was the mission here, out of MIT, was find and fill the gaps from scientific to entrepreneurial pathways, and then regional economic development. So a really big part of this was the incredible sort of athletes coming out of these labs were then all being recruited to different places. A big one was the West Coast. And so how do we keep all of this this brain power and these incredible technologists who could be entrepreneurs and create the right setting, the right innovation orchard for them here in Massachusetts? So a lot of what we do is not just filling the gaps on the equipment and the network and all the other things they need, but really thinking about the underlay of how Massachusetts can do its best to keep the companies here. And then I'll tell you a little bit about our effort to not just build a tough tech economy here, but then across the country, sort of creating a hub for tough tech in Massachusetts and then a national network for tough tech. So I am going to jump in and share some slides. And I'm also happy. I'll talk a lot about our mission and sort of what we do, but for the Sloanies that may be really interested, I can talk a little bit about business model if people are curious. And the TLDR is it's really hard, but really impactful and worth the mission. So again, our mission really is to support and accelerate tough tech companies whose technology can change the world. We started by even calling it tough tech, not deep or frontier, because there are a few key elements. The engineers from MIT, there's a toughness, there's a physical component to what they're doing, and the physical spaces we have usually have to accommodate for that big physical things. They are solving the world's toughest problems, so really tough challenges, and also have to be very resilient, so tough in another sense. We're also really focused on this idea of first-time founders coming out of the lab, so building that toughness and resilience in these incredible technologists on their pathway to become entrepreneurs. So this pathway that you see on this slide, this is really, from the idea of President Reif, and we really think about how we can fill the gaps from idea to investment and impact, what that pathway could be, and sort of all of the different models. Obviously, a lot of these companies are backed by venture capital, but there's new forming models of FROs, which is a focused research organization. So that pathway could look like a lot of different things, and our job is really to support the technologists who are thinking about taking that pathway. We execute on our mission as an incubator and accelerator through sort of three pillars we call programs, ecosystem, and infrastructure. I'll tell you a little bit more about those. We have a number of programs that I'll get into that are, all the way upstream, talking to PIs in labs who are thinking about creating an entrepreneurial lab and hiring in postdocs or having PhD students who will help them commercialize, to the actual teams and the PhD students who are ready to commercialize out. The programs we run, there's two specifically, and then a number of others a few times a year. One of them just had its 10th cohort that is called Blueprint. We have the faculty program that is called Whiteboard. We did that last week, and that was the 7th cohort. And the idea really is that we are informing, we are providing a framework and an arena for people to connect. Our Whiteboard program last week, we had people from, I think, about 20 different institutions here to do some case study work, talk in real time about what it would mean to start a company while also remaining in academia. And so allowing them the chance to do that. The ecosystem piece is really thinking about economic development and taking a step back of how you build a tough tech network. So if you're a brand new company, you have a first of a kind technology, think fusion. So you cannot, in a bubble, create a fusion company without also thinking about your business model, how you're going to plug into a market, the regulatory, even the permitting. There's all of these, what is your supply chain? How are you building that? All of these different components go into that. And so what we do is try to use our our platform to support these early stage companies who need help building that network. We've even hired in public affairs people to specifically support in all of these different areas. And that is, we sort of use our reach to host events, to bring people together, and really think about all of the right partners for, I'd say, tough tech at large, and then all of the different verticals that we're going to need. And then our infrastructure, the part of being an incubator means that we have a physical space. We actually have three. We have a main hub at 750 Main Street, so we're just like a stone's throw from campus. Next to, if any of you remember, the Candy Factory. So on a good day, you can go outside and smell Junior Mints. And we house over, I think total is 120 companies. There's anywhere between probably 600 and 1,000 people here every day. And we have an incredible range of what we're able to do because of sort of the flexibility we built into this building and, the wonderful partnership we had with MIT and being able to create this incredible space. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. One of the interesting pieces about tough tech and the way that I talk about it is that it's not just one thing, and it's mostly a convergence. And so we find that all of these different areas, applied AI and ML, biotech, climate, compute, advanced materials, manufacturing. Typically, these companies, when we talk about them, and we'll have a slide about them, have multiple of these different areas. And so it means that what they're doing is convergent. It's one of the reasons why when we thought about building this space, we're in a very dense ecosystem here with a lot of startup accelerators, a lot of incubators. We felt like this was an unmet need. And so in our physical space, you can do all of these things. You can have a wet lab next to an engineering space with a machine shop. And so for many reasons, the mission that we had and sort of the gaps that we were trying to fill didn't exist because they were probably only one of these verticals, and they weren't convergent of multiple. And so that's something that we think is inherent in tough tech because it is multiple disciplines coming together. And our ability to support it is this really flexible and agile set of resources, and really just the ethos of what we're trying to do. When a company comes to us and says, is there a way that in a biolab I could grow plant cells and we could have a growth chamber? Our answer is not, no, you can't do that. Our answer is, yes, we're going to figure out how we can do that with you because this is meant to be a space where all of them can do really hard things, first of a kind. And this physical building can be an accelerant for them. These are a number of the programs that we run. There is in residency probably another 200 events and programs that we'll run, but these are sort of our flagship programs. And I will get into each of these. Our Blueprint program is a really interesting one that originally was a way to sort of get at the PhD students who were probably in the lab but weren't yet ready to make that jump to commercialization and didn't really know what the entrepreneurial pathway was. And so we started pretty early on working with them to get them ready. And what we found was we just had our 10th cohort. We have been able to not just connect, I think about 50% of every cohort has been from the Boston area and the majority from MIT. But we've also been able to, with that, because it's a virtual program, other than the final day when they come and present, we've been able to have this reach where we can, with this program, bring more people into the fold. And so that's mission driven because it means that we are connecting more people, we are creating more translation activity. And in some cases, actually, those people will say, I'm ready to do this, and there isn't anywhere else to do it. So I'm going to come to Boston. And so it allows us to be a hub, but also allows us to connect to a lot of other institutions, which is a big part, I think, of how collaboration needs to happen. And we've had a number of our residents today have come out of that Blueprint program. So they've gone through, they feel like they're ready. What they produce through the program looks like a pitch deck. The idea is that they are not pitching to someone on the final day, they are presenting. And so they then have what they can go out and pitch with. But the idea is really that we are encouraging that process. They are getting through it. They're meeting with a number of different mentors, and whether it's venture, whether it's state programs, whether it's fellowships, whatever that looks like, we are providing that pathway and showing them the next steps. It's a pretty incredible program. I would, anyone here who's interested in being a mentor in that program, which is again virtual, about an hour or two a week, and then the final day. We always love to have people from industry come back and give their perspective. And you will, I promise, be fueled by some really incredible technologists who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs. Out of the Blueprint program actually was born this program that we run for faculty PIs, is Whiteboard. And what we found were in the earliest cohorts, we had faculty going through the program, but asking very different questions. They were really interested in equity, like how do you finance a company? How do you have the equity conversation? What does the licensing relationship look like with the TLO? And so we developed this separate program for these people who were probably not going to be full-time members of these startups, but really had all of these different questions and wanted to know how they could participate. So we have this program that is focused on human capital, financial capital, and intellectual capital, and we bring them in for the day. We have Sloan professors, we have HBS professors come and do a little bit of live case study work. This past time we did it with Dr. Cullen Bowie, who was a co-founder of Kytopen, which is a company here at the Engine. They are in the Engine Ventures portfolio. And Dr. Bowie then can go along his journey, talk about all of the different things he went through as a academic co-founder of a tough tech startup. So really fun for us. We've been able to bring, again, people from across the country here to do that and participate. And not only does it inform them of that pathway, but it also builds community. So they get to now have a stronger community and network. And then, the third pillar is infrastructure, and we call that residency. And so the idea that we can use this physical facility as an accelerant to these teams. Pretty early on, when I had first started at the Engine, one of the things that I thought deeply about was how could we help these entrepreneurs leverage all of the assets in Cambridge. And so basically for my first month, every day I walked to campus and met with a different lab or institute. I spent time at the Koch Institute and a number of the different core facilities, and asked if the entrepreneurs that we were going to support could use the space. And a number of them said, yep, they can. And if they're still MIT grad, or if they're MIT alum, this should be very easy. They can get right into the system. And others were eager to help, but didn't have the systems yet. And so what we tried to do was create a little bit of like Zipcar or Airbnb for labs and equipment. And the first couple things that people asked me to find were flow cytometers that they could use on an hourly basis. So they'd get a little bit of training, they'd log in, sign up for a half hour, an hour, whatever they needed, and be able to pay by the hour. And so we really built upon this idea of what is it you need and how can we help you? Started off a little bit concierge-like. And we had a small facility with very little lab space. And as we sort of like gathered these asks, we started to build the case for being our own core facility and having our own space. And so the building that we're in now, 750 Main Street, was a Matimco building. It had not been developed for years. It sat vacant since I think the early 2000s, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. And so we developed a business model. We developed sort of the thesis of what we wanted to do. This is back in 2018, and then started the process of building this facility out and creating what we wanted to be the home for tough tech. And so we moved in late 2022. We had about 35 companies at the end of 2022. End of 23, we were up to about 90, and today we're over 120 in residence. We host a number of events for them. So that could look like Management 101 trainings for not just the CEOs, but for all of their employees. We do a lot of community building and cohort building with the CEOs, the CTOs, CSOs, the COOs, really trying to make connectivity in this community. We have a resident and expert, or what we call a CXO program. So we have from Mintz a chief legal officer. From a financial group, we have a chief financial officer, and they're here to do office hours and connect on a regular basis. Tried having that be set up, and I think it works a little bit more for entrepreneurs of like they need it when they need it. So they can like say, I have a pain, can you give me the painkiller? And so that's how we run a lot of our programming. But we have a super engaged community. We have a lot of them tapping each other for their talent networks, talking about how did you do this? What does your board look like? And so that really has been a flywheel for how they can all, as first-time founders, which the majority of them are, use each other to build. And so as we think about growing what we've done over the past couple of years, we really think about creating not just the home for tough tech, but an institute. And so I'll give you an example of how we want to do this. Is not just continue to layer in the programming, which is incredible, and bring more people into the ecosystem, but for that pathway, as we think about, really trying to help more technologists become entrepreneurs and see their technology not just get investments, but really get to that impact stage. We want to be really smart about this and think about how we can be analytical. And I'll give you a quick example. In our last Blueprint cohort, we asked some of the more mature teams, both in the building and those who had moved out and graduated, if you will, if they would share back some of their earlier or current pitch decks. So these are proto founders going through our Blueprint program who really don't know what a pitch deck looks like. And a lot of them we found had not even participated in the wide range of programs available to them at their universities for entrepreneurial activity. And so this was the first time they'd ever seen it. But we had more than 15 of these, Series A, Series B companies donate back, or, in this like pay it forward way, give their pitch decks so that everybody could see that. And so that was sort of the first step into how can we become analytical about this. I think the next is that we're able to start looking at the 100+ companies in the building and identifying common threads. What are the different cases? What do management teams look like? If you're going to build an org, what are like 3 really good examples of an org for bio? What are 3 good examples for an engineering team? When you think about business model, what are the different pathways you can explore? And so these proto founders and really early entrepreneurs, first-time founders, can start to pattern match in a way that they hadn't been able to if you're doing a first of a kind. Because, for a fusion company, there isn't a pathway laid out. You are exploring and figuring out as you go. A lot of the companies in the building are doing something for a first time, and there isn't a very clear YC model for tough tech yet. And so that's a little bit what we're trying to build. And because of our, connection to MIT, we want to have a little bit of research in there so that we can write cases, we can present them, we can start to pattern match and really create this institute. And over time, we're thinking today about partnering with some really important fellowships in tough tech, over time developing those fellowships here, allowing people to come here, creating internship programs, and really building on not just the practice of tough tech entrepreneurship with the residents, but sort of the analytical and research part of that as well. And out of that comes thought leadership, and we can really help not just fuel what's going on in academia or help that, but where funding is going and coming from. And that's a hard thing to say in this current environment, but really thinking about how we fund research and where we can push that, and all of the different models coming out of a lab. I mentioned earlier the idea of an FRO, really exploring the different pathways of how to fund tough tech and what different types of companies they could look like. I have an incredible board of directors, including, if any of you saw the announcement yesterday, the new executive vice provost, Paula Hammond. And these are all leaders in tough tech. They are leaders in Boston. They are leaders in their field. Angela Kohler is leading the new MIT HEALS initiative. Tom Khalil has been an incredible advocate for science in his roles of the director of policy for the White House and working with Schmidt Futures. and now with Renaissance. And we are very lucky to have this board. They are very supportive, and really helping us think about the future for building this institute, and also our connectivity to the campus, to all of the things going on at MIT. Wrapping up a little bit, we have a number of events we do. Our flagship event every year is the Tough Tech Summit. That is heavily focused on really connecting the capital resources to the startups. And so that will be on October 28th. Around the summit, what we're doing is really trying to get not just the Boston and Massachusetts ecosystem, but create a little bit of a pull that week we're calling Tough Tech Week. And so if you've attended a climate week, or New York just had Tech Week where I was, a little bit along those same lines, but really sort of highlighting all of the things that make up tough tech. And so the different programs here, Mass Robotics or Mass Challenge, or right next door to us is Lab Central, all of the different industries, biotech, AI, robotics, all of the above will be highlighted that week. And not just from the startup angle, also thinking about the role of academia, all of the big corporates. I mean, I could throw a rock and hit 3 major biotech companies. And so really engaging this entire community to highlight what is done well in Massachusetts, to think about all of the models, and to form those new collaborations, to say, like, one thing we like to do is say, imagine that the technology works. So if you take out for a second, the tech works. You don't have to think, how are we going to get there? Assume it works. What else do we have to figure out? And so that's when bringing in all of the stakeholders in an ecosystem is really helpful. If it's permitting, if it's siting, if it's regulatory, that's when you really need local and different levels of government to get involved. And you can take a step back from just solving the tech and thinking about all of those other things you're going to have to solve. So I encourage all of you, if you are around, if you'd like to come, our next events are in October, that last week of October. We also, for anyone who would like to get involved in our Blueprint program, we'll run our fall cohort from September to October, and we have a final in-person day for presentations, which is just a really fun day to connect with incredible technologists who are like just on the verge of commercialization and like really excited about going down the entrepreneurship journey. And then, we have created now a nonprofit, sort of the evolution of the engine. When we were one and deeply intertwined with the venture group, we were a public benefit company. And as we've separated and gone into specialization mode, it made more sense, business model and impact, to become a 501(c)(3). And so we actually have both entities, but our sort of parent organization is the 501(c)(3). And so we're looking for support for all of the programs, and at large, what we're trying to do as an entrepreneurial support organization. Someone recently described it to me, and I love this quote, that incubators are like public infrastructure. They're really important to the health of an ecosystem and really hard to fund. There's also opportunities to support tough tech teams. You could do this either through mentorship and being a part of the program, or we have a program where you can actually sponsor a scientist or a company bench. And so it allows them to work here until they've been able to raise money, getting all of the data they need, hitting those milestones so that they're prepared to do that. As I mentioned, we have a number of in-person events. It would be great to connect with all of you. If you're in Boston and want to host an event, we have an incredible space here, and we give tours as a part of all of that. And then, everywhere up to naming opportunities in the building to really make a longer legacy impact. And then the least of all is our mailing list. If you'd like to stay in touch, we talk about a number of the things that we're doing. And I probably didn't have a slide, so I didn't have a prompt, but we also have this incredible NSF grant that has given us really interesting reach, so that we can take a lot of the programs we're running here in Boston and not just pull people into them and bring them here, but now take our programs and go to these different regions that we are supporting through this NSF Regional Innovation Engine grant. So with that, I think I will take the slides down to allow some Q&A. I'm happy to pop them back up if people have questions, but it might make sense go to Q&A.
Sure, Emily. So again, folks, put your questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. I usually like to ask a couple of the first questions, so I will use my privilege as the host to do so. Emily, by the way, thank you for an amazing presentation. I'm
Yeah.
fairly certain, unless someone knew exactly what the engine was doing already, they were kind of blown away by not even just what it's doing, how much it's accomplished. You mentioned dates like 2022, something started happening, and now there's 120, there's thousands of square feet, there's all these things going on. So the pace at which you've built the program out seems impressive. My first question is, what were MIT tough tech startups doing before the engine was there to support them?
Um, it's a really good question. I'd say if I think about, okay, so there's a few different threads. I think one, and this was in, I'm never going to remember the name of it. I will as soon as we hang up. In the original op-ed, there was the company that created this like silica membrane, basically that had many applications, was licensed by a ketchup company to go on the inside of a ketchup bottle. So it was this like really interesting moment that the technology was being developed, but it was actually going in a different direction because it like needed to find a market really quick because it didn't have those patient resources and the ability to think about market applications in a way in an impact lens, and it became a sort of licensing revenue stream. So that's one of the things, is like, let's not have this be the only output, is that it's licensed to a corporate for one reason. I think the other piece is that funding was so they would have to go out and find their own funding, and they would have to find a lot of funding, and you'd have to go on this really intense journey of like very, very early technology and constantly trying to convince people. Um, there are a number of company, like I think of the 3D printing companies that have had to go on that journey. I think it just took a really long time, and it was a really hard slog. And so you needed, 2017 was a moment where there actually were a number of, the engine was created and had a fund that could be this like really catalytic capital in an intervention moment. Breakthrough Energy Ventures also, right around that same time, started making these like really long-term bets with the idea that it was still going to make returns, but you could also, at the same level, and we were a public benefit company for this reason, you could also prioritize impact, but you had to really take big bets. Part of that journey, and Katie Ray, who runs the venture fund, talks about this a lot, is a longer time horizon. So the fund had brought LPs in who were also very mission driven, but it was an 18-year time horizon as opposed to
Wow.
5 or 7 or 10. And so that was a really incredible moment to get the LPs to get on board with that, really really mission driven LPs who understood the impact. And then, we think a lot about the earliest companies didn't have anywhere to go. There are not readily available chemistry labs. And, one of the earliest companies, two of the earliest in our first building, were Via Separations and Form Energy, both of whom are really big companies now. But they didn't have a chemistry lab that they could leave the MIT labs and go to. And so we had a room that had 5 chemical fume hoods. And so like that was fine, but we didn't have enough linear square feet of benches. And so we had to then help them. Some of the MIT labs on campus, the EHS lab, was able to house them for a little bit until they found their next place. And really what we were worried about was too much of their early dollars were going to go into infrastructure, which is just this sunk cost. And you may sign a 5-year lease at a minimum, but only need it for 2 until you've either grown out or you have to pivot. And so we were really trying to help them conserve those early dollars by representing the patient resources, capital infrastructure, all of these things that they were going to need. And I'd say there's a little bit of like in that moment, MIT making this grand gesture of saying, we are going to do this and we will have this intervention we're calling the engine, Breakthrough Energy Ventures. And the other I didn't name yet is this incredible, born out of MIT, this woman, Sarah Carney. It's called Prime Coalition. She created a really new, interesting capital vehicle that is catalytic capital that comes, the PRI is the program related investments. I might have had that wrong, but allows philanthropic capital to go in almost like a grant and create an evergreen fund. And that is a nonprofit. Sarah is a MIT Sloan alum. She had done a ton of work there. You should look her up because she's doing incredible things in this like catalytic, but for this money, the company wouldn't exist. So I think a lot of tough tech companies were graduating, were going to the West Coast because they looked like software or other things that they could make easy investments. But I don't know that I don't know that a fusion company was going to get a fusion or a quantum company were going to get seed investments, sort of, but for the leadership of MIT and the idea that this long to market, really tough early stage technology needed patient capital.
Right. I feel like this might be putting you on the spot, but I think this is a fair question. And I don't mean to be asking you to pick favorites, but you're gonna have to pick a favorite here.
Oh no.
What
Okay.
are the coolest technologies that are currently there? You mentioned a bunch of different things. I don't know if those are the cool ones or not, but it'd be really, I think, intriguing to ever know what are the really most interesting things that you are currently supporting.
Hmm. It is hard. Okay. Let's see, if I start on the fifth floor here, there's an incredible company called Foray Bio. The leader, Ashley Beckwith, is an MIT grad. If you think about the way that we could do reforestation, but in a lab, so synthetic biology for plant cells. And not only is she thinking about how to grow the cells, and she's also thinking about how to create a library of that so that it could be shared. And so that's just a really incredible application of agriculture, of synthetic biology, climate and sustainability. Really interesting company. I would look that up. Let's see. I just walked outside and a Sloaney, really interesting company. They're called Macrocycle. So Stuart was a Sloaney, and he went to Cornell first, which was also my alma mater. Sorry to tell you all. Stuart met Jan, who was in the engineering school, through our Blueprint program. Their company is upcycling, or it's circular economy for textiles and plastics. They are able to, with their technology, recycle, upcycle plastics and textiles to virgin grade, so it becomes feedstock for those industries with 80% less of the carbon. So just incredible company, really like on the verge of being able to do quite a bit. And just incredible founders, also from MIT. I will also say, Commonwealth Fusion Systems are no longer they're in one of our buildings, but not the main hub anymore. I got a tour last August from Darby Dunn, who I don't know what her title is now, because every time I talk to her, she's a new title. At one point, she was called the Mother of Dragons when she was building the Dragon rockets at SpaceX. But the sort of massive scale of what they're doing, but with incredible attention to every detail because they are an engineering firm also. It is hard not to be in awe of what they're building and how they're doing it. So if you don't already follow CFS, Commonwealth Fusion Systems, I would do that. What's another really interesting one? We talk a lot about Sublime Systems Cement here. They just had a lot of news recently, so they're able to create green cement, and cement is one of the highest emitters. eh, eh, they are able to create green cement through clean energy. Really interesting company. They are moving to a headquarters out in Western Massachusetts, just lost a $87 million grant from the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, but at the same time announced, because they are aggressively out there, a number of advanced market commitments from local construction companies and from Microsoft and others. So just, I would say those are the groups that are like really moving fast, still producing small amounts of either cement, and CFS is still building their Spark, their first of a kind tokamak. but like they are out there really paving that pathway, and we learn from them. All of the things that they're doing, we learn and bring those back to all of the smaller companies. Trying to think of who else. There's a really incredible company called Foundation Alloy. Jake is also a Sloaney, and he worked with Chris Xu, spun technology out of Chris Xu's lab, where they are creating novel alloys and all different types of new um, metals with new materials, and have a number of customers they're piloting with now. So Foundation Alloy, I said Foray, Macrocycle, Sublime System, and Commonwealth Fusion. Those are, I think, five really incredible. But like, if you ask me tomorrow, I might pick five different ones.
So you felt like you were on the spot, but then you came through. So those are really fascinating companies. I have one other question, and a lot of my questions overlap with questions people have been asking. I'm gonna defer to the audience. But the other question I had was, because you talked about the Blueprint program, which I think anyone who's been through, at least especially on the undergraduate side, has seen some of the stuff going on in the labs. But I think we know, if we've been on the inside, and certainly venture capital on the outside knows, that not every lab director or research scientist is the right person to grow and scale a company outside of the academic environment. So, as I guess maybe as part of Blueprint or adjacent to that, do you help things coming out of MIT find the right operational team, and maybe even the right CEO to take it from, a better ketchup bottle to a million ketchup bottles?
It's a great question. I think one of the most interesting outputs, so we do a like a pre and post survey for Blueprint, and we found one of the first time we did it, we've done the survey a few times now. First time going in, we asked people their understanding of the CEO role, and then their comfort with, or like if they thought that they would be that person. Very low understanding, very high idea that they would be the CEO in the beginning. And then that shifted. And I think that the shift we've seen at the end of Blueprint is people with a high conviction. I don't really know what it is, but I know I want to do it because I believe in my tech. People who felt that way ended up having a lot more understanding, really knowing it and wanting to dig in. We also see that there are people who go through the program and say like, oh my God, it's way too much. I'm a technologist. Turns out I care about the technology. I think I care more about researching it, and maybe I'm not that right person. We have included what we call commercialization collaborators from Sloan, from HBS, so that they can partner through the program when we identify people like that, and then afterwards, so that if there is the opportunity, in like Jake's case of Foundation Alloy, he was not the founder, he was not the technologist, but he found the technology, got really interested in it, and then with Chris Xu and the PhD student in Chris's lab, Jasper, co-founded the company. I'd say that's a little bit harder for us to do. I think part of the Blueprint alumni network means that we can bring people in and connect them. But that's not probably like our secret sauce. There's a great group within a number of academic institutions across the country called Nucleate, specifically focused on biotech, but Nucleate does a really great job of that matchmaking. And I'd say when we can, through programs like the commercialization collaborators, we do that, but it has to really be the right time. And so that's been just a little harder for us to do.
Right. I had some questions about collaboration with angel venture, that kind of stuff. And Mark asked a few questions about, does the engine interact with or compete with Angel Capital Association? How do they interact with angel groups? Those kinds of things. So curious. I know this is more on the venture side, but
Yeah.
to what degree do people who are, let's say, more on the early stage investing side, maybe in this ecosystem, have an opportunity to interact with engine entities on an investment scale?
Yeah. So one of the things that, as we separated from the venture side, like, so Engine Ventures is a early stage fund. They now have over $1 billion under management, and they have
Early
an
stage fund with $1 billion.
well, over three funds now under management.
Okay.
They are investing now out of Fund Three, I believe. Incredible portfolio. They have an incredible eye for talent. That was, as one company, that was sort of like how we interacted as with venture. I think now, as more of a community for tough tech, a home for tough tech, it was really important to us to make sure that we were giving access to capital. And so that meant that we needed to create really unique relationships with capital, very early stage, and even in some cases they look like grants or fellowships, all the way up to Series A, Series B investors. We have created what we call our investor network. We have an Airtable, both of all the companies that we support and of all of the investors. And so on a monthly basis, if not more, we will bring in an investor. Last month it was Khosla Ventures. A partner came in. They'll give a little bit of a talk of what they're looking for or a unique perspective, and then they meet with a number of the companies that they identified through this Airtable. I will say we are really interested in people who understand the problem, who care deeply about tough tech, and supporting these entrepreneurs. They need that early stage capital, and they need investors and LPs out there who understand the time horizon. It is just a longer time to market, and these tough technologies just need those patient resources. We are open for business, and we are meeting with venture groups regularly. A big part of the update to our Blueprint program was that we have a number of different capital providers. So yes, venture capital, but also DOE folks, DoD folks. There's people who make grants. There's fellowship opportunities, and we would welcome angel investors into that space and throughout the program. So that is a really great way for people to connect with us.
Great. Divya asked if there's upcoming or existing collaborations with MIT Heals, Mythic, and the Engine. I guess maybe that expands to there's 30 plus things like that at MIT, as I mentioned in my intro with acronyms. To what degree do you collaborate with the other MIT entities that are adjacent?
So that has been, since I became the CEO of the Engine, I think something that I've cared really deeply about. We have the executive vice president and treasurer, Glenn Shore, on our board. We have Paula Hammond on our board, and Angela Kohler, who leads Heals. And so I'm really thinking about how we work more deeply with those groups. I think one of the things Angela is, she's an incredible leader. She's also a founder and has had multiple spinouts. So she really understands the problem. As Heals was thinking about how they could develop programming, she said, hey, before we go create something new, another acronym or another program, why don't we sit with the Engine and some of the MGH folks, MGB, and like figure out how we do this together. And so I've had a couple of really incredible meetings thinking about, could the I think they're called step one grants or stage one grants that Heals will give out that look a lot like Deshpande Center, but maybe earlier. Could they then go through Whiteboard, or could we do specific programming that already exists for us for the groups that are going through Heals? And so the idea is that we are working incredibly closely with these programs so that we can leverage all of what already exists. And the 1 + 1 is 3 and 5 and 10, whatever we want it to be. But that is also, I think, the new provost, Anantha, and I spoke recently about how we can get more involved with the Martin Trust Center and how we could create internship opportunities here or fellowship opportunities. When I grabbed a cup of water before, I saw the founder of Macrocycle, and he introduced me to all of his interns. And I think 6 out of 7 were all from MIT. And so that to me is, we are right next to campus. There is a ton of opportunity. And so those are all of the different ways we're thinking about collaborating, getting all the way from undergrads up to PhD students involved here. And leveraging what we have to be more of that escape velocity for the people who are thinking about commercialization.
One of the questions I noted down before you started was, what's the best way for our local New York Sloan ecosystem to collaborate with the Engine? You had an opportunity slide, which was a bit broad. There were a lot of different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then someone asked about mentorship. What would you say is the one, if people that are excited about this and want to collaborate, what's the one sort of thing they should do next to have that opportunity?
I would say go to our website and there's a form on the bottom of the page that allows us to like actually start interacting. I would love to say email me, which is usually the first thing I say. But for the number of people I've told, it's quite a big queue.
Right.
We will be, Blueprint starts again in September. We'll be going through and thinking about applications. We typically pick mentors based on the sort of fields that come in from the application. So we're not going to, if there's no one from bio, we probably won't have bio mentors. That's never going to happen. But so if you'd like to be a mentor and you've done a tough tech company and you have entrepreneurship background, that would be a great way. But if you fill out that form and note that you are from the New York Alumni Club, we'll then know how to interact with you. So that's probably the easiest way.
Great. I had one last question. I think, as you know, Solve, primarily based in Cambridge, comes to New York once a year and
Oh.
does an incredible event here that is very uplifting. Would the Engine consider coming to New York once a year and doing something similar? You do a lot of events up in Cambridge, but not everyone can really make it up there to see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are so we're thinking about, as I said, building this national network. It's not New York City, but there's a really interesting. So one of the NSF regional innovation engines, RIEs, I say the engine so many times in a sentence, is in Binghamton, New York, and it is a collaboration of just about every school in New York, and that is a hub for batteries. And so we will be, I think, probably doing a one-day session of our Blueprint program, sort of like a boot camp and a whiteboard. And so I'd be happy to anyone who's interested, we can collaborate there. But yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, we'd be happy to come to New York. I think a number of the founders here are deeply thinking about if their pilot is here or their HQ is here, where else can they grow? Where are their customers? How can they get those offtake agreements or advanced market commitments? And who are the customers they need to be talking to? And we certainly know what a huge marketplace New York is.
Great. Well, thank you, Emily, and the whole team at the Engine for today's event. Generally speaking, keeping MIT brainpower and entrepreneurial energy on the East Coast, we're all in favor of. So thank you for championing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and folks, sign up to the newsletter, and hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Amazing.
Thank you all. This is really fun.
Thanks for your support, Colette.
Bye, everyone.